Today we're learning how to plot points on a coordinate graph. Now, you may have seen this before, but if not, we're going to just give a quick rundown of what the graph looks like. So this is your standard coordinate axis. It's broken up into 4 sections called quadrants. Quadrant 1, Quadrant 2, Quadrant 3, and Quadrant 4. Generically, we label this line the x-axis, with the right being the positive direction and the left being the negative direction. And our vertical line is the y-axis, with up being the positive direction and down being the negative direction. So when we're given coordinates, we work based on that. 0, 0 is the origin. That's the point at the very middle where the two axes meet. Like I said, we call that the origin because that's where we start. If I want to plot another point, say -3, 5, I look at it in alphabetical order, x, then y. So I go 3 spaces in the x direction to the left because it's negative, and then 5 spaces in the y direction up because it's positive. And that puts me right here. There's my point, -3, 5. So let's put a couple of points on our graph and see if we can identify what the coordinates are. We'll place one here and one here, and we'll do one here as well. So let's start with this one on the bottom left. What are the coordinates of the point? Well, we know the coordinates are made up of an x part and a y part. The x part, we're going in the negative direction 3 spaces, so it's going to be -3. The y part, going in the negative direction 3 spaces, so that's also -3. So the coordinates at that point are -3, -3. Let's look at the next one. The x part, if we count over, we have to move in the positive direction 7 spaces. So the x value is 7. Then we have to move in the y direction, and the negative direction on the y, 3 spaces. So we have -3. The last one, we have to move 3 spaces in the positive x direction. So we have, starts with 3, then we have to move up 6 spaces. So the coordinates are 3, 6. Let's plot a few points. First one is -4, 4. So we start by going 4 spaces in the negative x direction. Then we go 4 spaces in the positive y direction. Puts us right here. So let's label that. We'll call it A. The next point we'll call B is 3, -2. So we go +3 in the x direction and -2 in the y direction. And that's where we put point B. The last point we'll call C. Its coordinates are 0, -4. So we don't go anywhere in the x direction. We just go 4 in the negative y direction to right here. And that's where we put C. Now, we can use this to graph functions. So example 3 in your book asks you to graph the function y equals 2x minus 1 with the domain or inputs of -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So the first thing we want to do is find what y values go with those x values, what range values go with our domain values. So if we put -2 into the function, what do we get? -5. If we put -1 into the function, what do we get? -3. If we put 0 in, what do we get? -1. If we put in 1, what do we get? 1. If we put in 2, what do we get? 3. So we have coordinates here. -2, -5, -1, -3, 0, -1, 1, 1, and 2, 3. So all we have to do is plot those points. -2, -5 is 2 units to the left, 5 units down from our origin. 2 units to the left, 5 units down. -1, -3 is 1 unit to the left, 3 units down. 0, -1 is 0 units left or right, 1 unit down. 1, 1 is 1 unit to the right, 1 unit up. And 2, 3 is 2 units to the right, 3 units up. And so that's how we graph our function. If we're given a table, we can make what's called a scatter plot based on that table. So in example 4, we're given a table that says 1920, the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution gave women the right to vote. The table shows the number of votes cast in presidential elections both before and since women were allowed to vote in millions. And so it tells us that a year 0, which is 1920, when women gained the right to vote, there were 27 million votes cast. In year 4, which is 1924, 4 years after, we got 29 million votes. Year 8, 1928, there was 37. Year 12, there were 40. And then if we go back before that, -4, which would have been 1916, 19 votes were cast. -8, 15 votes were cast. And running out of room here, but -12, 1928, there were 15 million votes cast. So we can make a graph based on that. Now let's adjust our graph a little bit. We don't need the negative quadrant because we can't have negative output. You can't have a negative number of votes cast, but we do have negative inputs. So we're going to change our graph just a little bit, shift it down a little bit to make it easier to graph. Now, let's label our x-axis. Well, we don't want to do that. We don't want to go up 1, 2, 3, 4 because we're never going to reach 12 in time. And since we're going up by 4s each time on our table, we can go up by 4 each time down here. And we'll go down 4 as well. As far as our y-axis, we can go at whatever scale we want. Let's go up by 4s as well, just to match. But we'll do, let's do every other box being 4. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. No, that's a bad idea. And the reason that's a bad idea is because we've got to get all the way up to 40, and we're not going to reach that with what we've got here. So sometimes we've got to go back and adjust what we were doing to fit our graph. So let's make every one 4. I think that might give us enough room. Oops. We've got to make it all the way up to 40 to have room for everything on our graph. There we go. So our first point is at -12, 15. So we go to -12 on the x-axis and up to 15, which will be just shy of the 16 right here. We got -8, 15. So back to -8, same height as the last one. Then we got -4, 19. So that's going to be just under the 20. We got 0, 27. So that's going to be on the y-axis at 27. Then we got 4, 29. So that should be just above 28. Then we have 8, 37. So we go just above 36. Then we have 12, 40. So we go all the way up to 40. And there's our graph. And so from that, we can see that the votes steadily increased after 1920. And in fact, they were already increasing before that, probably as the population went up. But they went up even faster when the women were allowed to vote. You see that before women were allowed to vote, we had a slow trend upward. But then we had a huge jump when the women got the right to vote. And it continued to go up after that. All right, so I want you to try graphing some points on your own. So if you have a piece of graph paper, get it out, and I'll give you 3 points, and we'll graph those, and I want you to identify what quadrant they are in as well. Or if they're not in one quadrant or another, then what axis are they on? So take a minute, pause the video, plot these points, determine where they're located, and then restart the video and we'll check your answers. So in order to locate A, we go to the right 2 units and up 5 units, because we got a positive 2, positive 5. That's where A belongs, and that is quadrant 1. For B, we go to the left 1 unit, and then we don't go up or down because our y value is 0. So here is B, and that's on the x-axis. C is at -2, -1, so we go back 2, down 1. And what quadrant is that in? That is quadrant 3. Okay, so just as a reminder, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have the x-axis and the y-axis. So that's how we label our locations. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. If not, you can move on to your homework or watch the video again if you need to see something repeated.